I'm Sarah Hubbard, and this is Karen Willey, and we're the co-organizers of the Seattle Women of Design and UX. We've been running this meetup for a year now, which is very exciting, our 1 year anniversary this month. So we really aim to do monthly events with the community, the UX community here in Seattle. Karen and I started at startups in Seattle, where we moved here, and we're at startups where we were the only women, we were the only designers. We really missed that sense of community, and so that's why we created this group, and we were hoping we could get everyone together and really work together, learn from each other, and have events like this. So thank you again. Thank you. And then one big announcement is that next month we are doing lightning talks. Those will be at General Assembly, and it's about how sort of your unique background transitions into a UX career. And we have one more spot open for a lightning talk speaker, so if you're interested in doing that, you can come find me, or we have little slips of paper at the snack table back there if you want to read your information, and I'll email you. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Larry here at SVC.
Yay! Just go a seat up here if you'd like to come in. Oh, I'm going to say that again. Only now there isn't a seat up here. Anybody have an empty chair next to them? There we go. My name is Larry Asher. I'm one of the co-directors here at SVC, and I want to thank Karen and Sarah for coming together with us and letting us help you put this event on. It's just the coolest thing in the world to see this room full of people on a beautiful summer. No, it isn't. But it could have been. For those of you who don't know what goes on here, and I recognize so many of you, I think this is probably wasted words, but we offer a 1-year certificate program in user experience. There's also one in UI and visual design for digital, and a third one on content writing. But you're interested in user experience, as are we. And I would just like to say that don't let the other instructors know that I said this, but this Cheryl Curris here is probably like the bombiest of the bomb types of instructors. And so if you share any part of Cheryl's personality, knowledge, skill, DNA, anything, we'd love to talk to you about teaching or mentoring, because every single one of our students is assigned a professional mentor, and we actually pay you to do this. So if that's of interest, you can give back and get some coffee money at the same time. Just get in touch with us, which is pretty easy to do, info@svcseattle.com, and let's start a conversation with that. So thanks again to you guys for including us, and thanks to all of you for coming.
All right. So thank you all for coming. We're so excited that this room is full. So Rock the Whiteboard, this actually is sort of a follow-up event to a portfolio event we had at Google a couple months back. It was really about the anatomy of a good portfolio. And after we had that event, a lot of people came up to us afterwards and said, okay, great, I think my portfolio looks good, but when I get that on-site interview, there's often a design challenge or a whiteboarding challenge, and that is terrifying, and how do I do that? So, okay, Cheryl's gonna put in her password. Okay.
Still on?
Are we on? We're in? Okay. So, that's what today's event is about. And quick intros again, I'm Karen Willey, co-founder of seaDUXX. I'm an interaction designer at Google, previously at Cloud Choreo, which is a Seattle area startup. And I'm excited to be here today giving you this talk with Cheryl.
My name is Cheryl Corris. Again, I'm an instructor here at SVC, which is awesome. I'm also a designer at Google and former COUX manager at Microsoft. Today we're going to look at what is a whiteboard challenge and why do I have to do it on an interview to be a UX designer. We're going to talk a little bit about some do's and some don'ts, having a plan of attack. We're going to do some live whiteboarding, which is going to be really exciting. Then we're going to have a Q&A panel. So it's going to be a lot of fun. This is a different format than anything you might be used to, so come with us and let's have a good time. You may be wondering, hey, why the heck does my interview include a whiteboard challenge or a design exercise? This is really a good chance to showcase who you are and your approach to problem solving. It's a good chance to take a look at how you collaborate, how you give feedback and take feedback. You're going to show your creativity and your ability to share ideas and ideate pretty quickly. Also, it's a good chance to really let your storytelling and presentation skills shine. We're going to talk a little bit about best practices for that as well. It can be kind of intimidating. You may get a design prompt that looks something like this or nothing like this. They're usually pretty ambiguous. Design an alarm clock for the blind. Design an ATM for children. We've seen these go from really specific to really ambiguous. And what do you do when someone verbally gives you this prompt? How do you unpack it in a process that you may be used to taking weeks or months to do? You have a really short amount of time, and how can you do that effectively and also really quickly?
So, step 1 of advice, take a deep breath. And here's some actual do's and don'ts to get you through it. So first of all, feel free to write down the problem. A lot of times you're going to get this prompt verbally, and don't feel pressure to jump up to the whiteboard and start sketching. Write it down on the board, write it down in your notebook, just take a beat to really think through and absorb what you've been asked to do. Secondly, just map out your space. Again, you can take a moment to see what area you have to work with. How big is your whiteboard? Is it a giant piece of paper on a wall? Where are you going to start, and are you going to try and make some linear progress or just jot down thoughts as they come to you? But most importantly, really start by asking questions. The sort of not so secret of a design exercise is that the design part is not really the solution. How you approach the problem, how you think about it, what questions do you ask, what are the things that you need to know before you can come up with a solution is really what they're looking for. So don'ts, again, don't feel rushed. You don't need to start sketching right away. Analyze the problem, think through what you know, what you don't know, and there will be a lot that you don't know. And also don't be afraid to put a little personality into it and showcase your background. If you have experience designing something similar or in a similar area, if you've seen something before or tested something before, feel free to add that into your content and sort of your talk track of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And we do like to throw in, don't insult existing designs. Sometimes you might be asked to improve or build off of an existing design. And really the way to approach that is to point out what you think is not working and why that is, and what are the opportunities for improvement, what would you change. So again, it's just more of that positive spin on it. And really the thing to remember is the session might be 30 minutes, 60 minutes, we've seen them as long as 90 minutes. And it's really just a burst of time in which an employer wants to see what is your design process and for you to highlight your own creativity. No one expects you to come out of this with a final solution. It's really just, again, how do you approach it? How do you dig into an ambiguous problem? And last, try and have fun with it. Because we're all designers, we like drawing little boxes and lines and arrows everywhere. So this is just really your opportunity to have fun with it, sketch, throw out some ideas, no matter how ridiculous they may be.
Great, so we're going to talk a little bit about the steps in the design process of a whiteboard exercise. We mentioned earlier it's a really short burst of time, so you're going to move really quickly. This is what an abbreviated process could look like, and we'll walk through each one of these steps. And we will be sharing this deck out as well. So you're going to start with research, and we put research in air quotes, because you don't have time to do lengthy research, right? You're moving really quickly. If we think about that alarm clock for the blind, it would be really cool to do a 3-month-long diary study to understand sleeping habits, but ain't nobody got time for that. So you're going to write down that problem as stated, clarify by asking questions, really tease apart, gather as much data as you need to start thinking about how to create a solution. You really want to make note of your assumptions. So again, in moving so quickly, sometimes you just need to either answer your own question or get a quick answer from the interviewer and move on. So you don't want to get hung up on the small details, the nuances of needing to find the exact target persona to talk to. You just need to get an answer and move on, and make note of that assumption as well. Again, not getting stuck on the details. This is also a great chance to note where you would want to partner with a dedicated user researcher. So again, there may or may not be one in the room, but it would be really cool to talk about, how additional research would influence your design decisions. Again, this is where we look at your problem-solving approach, the ability to embrace ambiguity, which is something a lot of us have to deal with daily, And also your time management. Again, you want to move pretty quickly through the beginning of these stages because you want to give yourself enough time and space to really dive into a solution and ideate there as well. My favorite part, ideation. So again, the reoccurring theme here is that you want to think aloud, continue to ask questions, continue to talk through your design process. That takes some practice, but really articulating what you're thinking, why things are working, why things aren't working, additional open questions, continue to verbalize that. And we'll see some examples later tonight. One suggestion that I got from Karen, which is really helpful, is sometimes write down bad ideas. You know, hey, I know this won't work, but if we're designing an ATM for children, maybe we create this robot that gives them $1 every day. Or, you know, it's something that you know probably won't work, but you don't know, there could be something really interesting there, and you can articulate why it won't work and continue to move on. And again, dream big. Maybe that robot is something you want to unpack, but also recognize the constraints as well. This part of the process is really where we start to see your creativity, where you want to innovate, and also your ability to pivot.
So next is ideation and prototyping sort of blend together, but the prototyping phase, again in really big air quotes, because you're not actually producing anything legitimate. But it's really just taking those pieces that you've created so far, the assumptions, what are the problems you're trying to solve, what are the ideas that you had, and really starting to bring those pieces together. Again, you want to keep thinking aloud at this point, but really you should be focusing on the why. Why are you pulling some ideas forward and pushing other ideas back? How do you see these pieces connecting? But again, in relation to pivoting, don't be afraid to recognize when something won't work. If you're 45 minutes into a 60-minute design exercise and you realize that there is a problem with your design, don't go forward, go backwards. But that moment where you realize that something isn't working is exactly what people are looking for in these interviews. Why did you realize it's not working? What changed? What new information did you get, or understanding did you come to? And again, just really that narration of what you're doing and why you're doing it is a way for you to demonstrate how you're user-centered in your thinking, and also connecting data to design. And by data, we sort of mean your like early stage assumptions here from that like research phase. So what was it that you have assumed, and how are you connecting that back to the solution that you're providing? So last is really just summarizing your solution. So again, with that time management piece, you want to leave some time at the end to sort of recap what you've done. Like, how did you get where you ended up? Why does your proposal solve the solution? Or again, why doesn't it solve the solution, and how did you realize that? Also just stating any unanswered or open questions that you have. If you had unlimited time, if you had 3 months to do a diary study, what are the things that you would do next? And also, what are some of the ways that you would measure if your design is working or not? Sort of how would you test this solution that you've proposed? And again, this is actually a really great time to highlight your presentation skills. As designers, one of the big pieces of our job is presenting and justifying your design decisions. So again, this is sort of a microcosm of that daily work process that we do. And again, with the thinking is really communicating what is your criteria for assessing the design. How do you look at it and decide what's working and what's not?
One of the questions we get a lot is, how do I practice if I don't have a huge whiteboard at home? Or I don't have floor-to-ceiling windows covered in paper? Try practicing on paper, on your sketchbook. That's the best way to kind of like just get in the habit of not just voicing what you're doing, but really starting to map out your process kind of by hand. Again, it's a skill that we do daily, so it's a good thing to get in the habit of. Try role-playing with friends. We're going to see a little bit of that later tonight, but that's a good chance to kind of put each other on the spot, have someone to answer those hard questions. And again, just getting in the habit of voicing the design decisions and voicing your process out loud, explaining why things are working and why they're not, even if you have to lock yourself in a conference room at work to do that. Some really great resources. Again, we'll share this deck out, but resources to take note of. All of the design prompts that we're using tonight come from a book called Solving Product Design Exercises, appropriately enough. There's also a really great website called Designer Size that will kind of spit out a random prompt at you. It has a timer. It has, do you want an easy, medium, or hard one? So that's a good resource to check out to kind of practice yourself as well. So now, let's rock the whiteboard. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to pull a design challenge out of the jar. It's kind of improv style, so we're going to play interviewer and interviewee. There'll be 15 minutes for each design exercise. It's a really short amount of time. So you're going to see us move really fast, but we're going to kind of hopefully check some of the boxes that we just talked about. And then we'll take about 5 minutes to kind of recap each one and make out, maybe point out things that worked, things we would do differently. If you can't see, don't worry. We're gonna you're gonna hear what we say, but we're also gonna leave these up and move them around the room, so there'll be opportunity to mingle later and kind of take a look at them. And again, don't worry if you can't see. We're gonna do our best to draw big and be loud. I'd love to introduce our interviewees. Kristen is an interaction designer at Google, focused on developer tools. In addition to design work, she has taught design thinking workshops to over 300 adults and students, and is an eternal improv enthusiast and former performer, which makes me think she's going to be really good at this. Julie works as an interaction designer at Google on Kubernetes. She's active in the UX community and has been serving as a UX mentor for both Hexagon UX and out-of-office hours. In her personal time, she enjoys visiting museums and has recently begun learning how to code. She's also an amazing whiteboarder. So, we're going to put up the timer. And I think Julie's going to go first, and I'm going to play the role of interviewer. So I'm going to be here to answer Julie's questions. It varies by interviewer. You may get feedback. You may have a poker face. You never know. So we'll kind of see how it goes from here. While Julie gets mic'd up, Tori, let me pick one of these out of here. This is the design challenge that Julie is going to be doing. Right.
Whoa.
That's a good one. Thank you. I don't want to give it away until she's done. And again, Julie's going to have these 2 whiteboards here. We've limited the colors because there was about 12 colors. We've limited it to the typical whiteboard colors, but if you need another color, you can tell us. So, will you help me start the timer?
I have to hold it like this. It doesn't really work, so you guys can start thinking about how to improve it.
All right, I'm gonna leave these here. You can pick whichever ones you like. I will just, Tori has chosen your challenge. Karen, will you start the timer?
Oh, I'm sorry, I have to start the timer.
Okay. Julie, your prompt for tonight is you are going to design the UI on the screens on the back of an airplane seat. Right into the prompt. Very good.
Sorry, I'm supposed to say a deep breath.
Funny you mentioned that, Julie. Our user research department found that parents traveling with small children use the back of the airplane seats more than anyone else. So we really want to design with them in mind. On the way.
So, design for parents first. And is there any limitations
Great question. We don't want to change the hardware at all, so we're stuck with the screens that we have on there today. The only gesture it supports is a one-click, a touch. Maybe, we'll see. Okay. So, it's a one-handed whiteboard challenge. Yes, never been done before.
If you want, it can be done. Start with currency, right? Currency. So I'm thinking, okay. So I know who are we designing for and how we is there any specific things that the airplane would like to incorporate, like specific functionality?
Great question. People love to watch movies,
Okay.
so let's highlight movies.
Okay, so since it's for small children, so I'm thinking Disney movies, other like popular. Sorry, I'm not from US. I don't know any like popular US.
It's a watch anything.
Movies and things like that. Well, maybe it's for international, like travelers and from.
Great.
So maybe we'll just incorporate international coverage that part of demographic as well. Okay, so movies, Disney, other movies, and any other things we would want to serve them with this screen.
People really love the track my flight. They want to know how much longer they got stuck in the seat with small children.
Okay, so since we don't have much time, normally I would ask more questions, but I think your interviewer wants to see how you come here, so I'm going to start design. So we know what our user, we know what our design for, and know some of the functionalities we want to incorporate. So just thinking for small children, normally they have like a short time of like attentions and just thinking about trying out some things. Attention, and also like parents probably want to help them to search for some movies. And also there's a cost as well for the contents. So not all the movies will be available, and how we making the ones are available.
Oh, funny you mention that. We've just done some research. We're going to partner with all the movie studios. All movies will be free on all flights moving forward.
Yes.
Cost is not an issue
So we
here.
don't need to worry about cost. That is fantastic. Okay, cool. So all the movies, and we'll cover all the population. That's just fantastic. And so I'm thinking screen seed. I haven't thought any. I'm thinking there will be like a lot of limitations, things like that. But I can't think of any right now. Oh, there is one. So sometimes I'm thinking like when you step on the screen, the seat in front of you would pull back. So you have this weird, you have this weird relationship. So maybe this screen should be designed to be able to somewhat pull forward, so you can see it. Yeah, I don't know. Like just the drawing is done. Pull forward. That's kind of like hardware kind of thing. And on the plane, it's really, really loud. But we're going to offer, I assume, we're going to offer like headphones.
Everyone gets free headphones.
Yes.
It's a great idea.
Yes. Woo. Free headphones. Okay, free headphones and how let's keep this really quiet. Yeah. Yes. We want that, don't we? Okay. And then so now I'm thinking like what kind of headphones should we like? Like over the head, that. Okay, we don't worry about headphones. Okay. So on the airplane, it's also sometimes it's really bumpy. So I think the touch space need to be bigger. So it's more lenient when you touch it, right? So touch point. Okay. And now again, due to the time limit, let's start thinking about workflow. I'm going to think about it's a mom with probably a 5-year-old little girl, and they're on a do you make them suffer for international flight? Okay, let's just say for New York, so 6 hours is bad enough. Yes, 5 hours.
Oh, Cheryl.
Okay, so yes, so this mom with this 5-year-old girl, they're going to from Seattle to New York, and flight is about 5 hours. So I'm thinking how they are gonna start using this thing, or like their journey beyond this way. So probably when they first go on the plane, there's announcement and things like that. But normally I would notice is when you go on the flight, you will need to be sitting there for a while. So maybe, that's a really long time. So maybe we'll make that available, make the movie available for them before that time as well. So mom will take the girl on the flight, and they will probably be really excited about the our trip at that time. They will start searching. I don't know. Maybe let's think about this. So if they see the screen, what can we first offer them to see? We think like the 2 big functions. There's like movies, and there's like other like live tracking. I just say this is like 2 things that we care about. And then like if the little girl is going to start by exploring themselves, what other things we need to think about that can help them help the little girl to explore? Maybe 5-year-old is thinking about Disney movies, like things about very call out. I think for small children, like colors and stuff are very important to them. So track their attention. Maybe make bigger categories so they don't need to scroll or something, because that's always very challenging on the flight. So you can have like big categories. 1, 2, and this is maybe like a princess, and no, princess and what other things they do? Cat. Okay. Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah. So you can go to ask me or anything. Okay. So you have the princess and stuff. Say the little girl selected the princess. What are we showing them? Are we going to show them? So I'm thinking like different movies probably sometimes have like sequels, not just one. And each part is I don't know, like each movie has their like highlights and things like that. Maybe we can make little clips, little clips that can play automatically or play parts of it. And so this is parts of the I don't know, this may not work. We'll see. Okay, so like they can play automatically or yeah. And what I noticed is like little kids tend to ask questions to their parents a lot. So maybe they would need to do is their earphones have some functionality that is going to talk back. Remember we're like seeing those earphones, like if you switch the button on that earphone, you can hear someone talking and switch back and forth to just your earphone. And yeah, so like add that. And And so, and then like, I'm always thinking like, on the airplane, like trying to control the volume is difficult too. So, but because we're stuck with a touch screen, so maybe there's some ways, like on the side or something, a little thing that when you touch it, it pops up and you can like adjust it somehow. I don't know. And then I'm thinking like let me think about this. To look at the category, to look at the parts of it, and yeah, I started watching the entire movie. Probably halfway through, it would be like, other announcement and things like that. There'll be some sort of like glitch somewhere, which I can't out right now, but yeah, it's when like on the in the air, maybe there's some things like
You're at the 1 minute mark anyway.
Can you present your solution?
Oh yeah.
Walk me through
Yeah.
where we got to where we are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we started with like thinking about the without question as a whole, and then like thinking about who are our users and what exactly we're designing for. Like at this point, the notice I have jotted down some quick notes that's gonna be helpful or not. Like more often they're not helpful. If you notice. And what are the limitations, trying to think about that, and like think about all of the users as well, cover as much as you can, and ask many questions as you can to your viewers, and just like, because they are interviewing you and they have the power to set boundaries. You can ask for any functions that can help you in the future to really design a feature, they're really like looking for any solutions you can think of. I don't think there's a necessary one way to do it. And with the function, you can start to start thinking about like one user journey kind of thinking. I just made an assumption. I didn't even chat, and like at this point, your interviewer actually don't care about that. They care more about how you can come up with this user journey and how you can go about with it. I admit this is not the best session I've done. Probably I'm like too nervous or something. But
I think the point is you didn't finish and you unpacked it in a way of like asking lots of questions. We had constraints, we had dreaming big, and so I think it was a really good combination of all of that.
thank you so much.
Well done.
Cheryl.
Thank you. Awesome. All right.
All right. We're heading over for pound number 2.
Oh, were you gonna unpack that before?
Huh?
Were you gonna discuss that before?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cheryl started the recap a little bit, but I think just really the notable thing is obviously this was like a short session, but Julie spent over half the time really like drilling into what is the problem, what are the constraints. Because I think when you get just like a big wide open prompt, it's really easy to just draw a blank, like how do you approach something like that? But when you start defining those constraints, you start sort of building out restrictions for yourself. And I feel like once you have a more constrained scenario, that's where the ideas start to come in. So I thought that was a good representation of that.
She also didn't finish. I think that's part of the biggest thing. Karen touched on this in the beginning, and that like you're probably not going to finish. You could do this for days. I mean, you do it for weeks and months at a time, right, on a particular project. So it really is just like setting the tone for how you problem solve. So, if this were an interview, I want to work with Julie because she asks lots of really great questions and unpacks it together, and like we kind of had a collaboration there for a second. Again, some interviewers will give you that, and others won't. But it was a really good chance to see like how she might unpack a problem in the real world or at work together. So well done, Julie.
Thanks.
That's a hard thing to do in front of other people.
Yeah, any other questions before we get to the next prompt? All right. Can you hear me? You can yell at me if you can't hear me. I'm not, I just want to trick
Start by tripping the interviewer.
Or yourself. Or yourself. Okay. Are you ready, Kristen? I'm ready. All right. Your prompt is to build a desktop app dashboard for a general practice doctor. Okay. I'll take a deep breath too. So we're designing a desktop or tablet app. Desktop app dashboard. Desktop. Okay. Desktop dashboard for a general practitioner. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do first is ask you some questions about this space and if there are any like underlying issues that you already know about that we might want to tackle. A little bit more about the day in the life of this GP, and then I'll do some free association, which you're welcome to come along for the ride, and then we'll start designing. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, so I guess when I think about this GP, is there something that we're trying to solve in his or her life with this desktop dashboard?
Yeah, because general practice doctors see people for such a wide range of things, they often need to brush up on a particular client before they see them.
Okay, that's great. So they're brushing up on a client. And do you have any idea of how many clients they see in a day?
We do not know.
Okay, so I'm just going to guess that let's say they have an 8-hour day. They're not going to see clients all the time, and they'll probably see a client for 30 minutes at a time. That could be totally wrong. I'm making that up. So let's say they see 12 clients a day. That is my first assumption. And this GP, when they're brushing up on their clients, does that mean that most of the clients are returning, or are there some new clients in there as well?
We think it's about a 70-30 split between returning clients and new clients.
Okay, so that makes me think, so first of all, I'm thinking about how the doctor might need to enter information. So if they're a returning client, then they'll need to brush up on this information. But if they're a new client and if they're a returning client, they'll need to enter information as well so they can brush up on it next time. Okay, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. So do you have any idea from research with these doctors what kind of information they want to brush up on?
Yes, primarily the most important thing is obviously the state of their health, pre-existing conditions, so they don't have to ask them their family history every time they come in. But also, we've heard from doctors that they want to be more approachable, so some piece of personal information could be impactful.
Okay, great. Approachable. Cool. So that makes me wonder, like, what does it mean to be approachable, and what kind of information can a GP call up and say back to the person that could be meaningful? So what I would want to do in terms of user research is actually sit down with doctors and understand how they build relationships with their clients. And I'm sure a lot of this will come out because you're an expert and you've talked to these doctors and worked with them before. So they'll very likely want to look at the health and the conditions and the history. But I'm specifically looking at like what makes a good relationship with a doctor, and how do they want to be perceived. So that's a lot of like interesting like hearts and minds stuff. So I'd say user research, interviewing doctors. Let me look at the time. Okay. And the key thing is here to understand how they build their relationships with their clients. Okay, so when you think about
When you think about like how to define success with this, do you have anything in mind?
The success metric here is focused on the returning clients. Doctors want to see less turnover in their clients, less clients leaving them over time.
Okay, less turnover. Okay, and is there anything related to like turning over patients faster?
You mean being able to see more patients?
Yeah, because they don't have to like ask you about your health conditions.
We don't know yet.
Okay. Yeah, and that I feel like turnover almost maybe goes a little bit against this idea of being approachable and building a relationship. Because if you come in there and you're like, hey Karen, how's your like diabetes? What's wrong? That doesn't exactly make you like a great. That doesn't make you have a great bedside manner. Okay.
Oh, sorry. To clarify for turnover, I mean like people leaving their practice as opposed to rushing to the next appointment.
Okay. From practice. Okay, great. That's good. Sorry about asking for your diabetes. Okay, so let me think. So now let's do a little free association. So if I'm looking at this, what I'm really drawn to is this idea of being approachable. Because I think it's pretty normal to have electronic health records with your health conditions and family history. That is another assumption, which I'm going to label. So I'm assuming they see 12 clients. I'm assuming that this information is pretty readily available, given whatever tool they already use. And I'm not even going to ask questions about that because that's going to send me down a rabbit hole. So what really matters here is how they build their relationships with their clients. And because I can't talk to any doctors today, I'm just going to make some assumptions here as well. So I would imagine that you could build a successful relationship with your client if you remember things that you talked about last time. So often when I go to the doctor, they'll say like, how are you doing? Oh, you just moved here, that's so great, where are you living, blah, blah, blah. If they ask me, like, how are you liking Lower Queen Anne? Then that could be really meaningful because they remember our conversation. So I'm gonna say remember things from prior conversations. These are all assumptions, by the way. And then it could be really interesting for them to remember, I'm just going to say random stuff like their outfit from last time. Observant, good in a doctor. I'm going to say it would be really interesting if they remembered, like maybe just a really, I guess, like interesting characteristics about a person. So if this person like ask a million questions, then maybe I could start off by saying, don't worry, Karen, you can ask as many questions as you want. I know you're really careful about this, and I want to spend as much time with you as possible. So I'm going to write characteristics of the patient. And I'm going to stop there because I don't have a lot of time. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this idea of like entering information into this desktop dashboard. So actually, when you say dashboard, what makes this a dashboard?
What do you think makes it dashboard?
Like cool gears and speedometers and stuff. So there's like, if I think about a dashboard, there's like information about the person. I don't know if you want to see any information in an aggregate. Maybe if we're looking at turnover, it could be like length of, I can't think of a proper word, so length of coming to this place.
Yeah, let's define a dashboard as multiple pieces of information,
Okay.
sort of like an overview.
An overview. Okay, let's go over here then. Let's start drawing. So I don't have a lot of time. So if I'm looking at like, let's start with an aggregate, and then I also want to do an individual person, and then I also want to do how you enter data, because I think that could be the hardest part. Ooh, I should probably start with that, because that's the hardest, but I'm not going to. So if I'm looking at the aggregate, let me start with the individual. So we'll just call this length of coming to, I didn't even write to, this place. I'll just say that. Length of coming to this place. That makes sense? Okay. And then, oh, maybe like a picture of this person, their age. This is probably really not important, so I'm going to slide it up here, because I would imagine the more important information is the, well, is the health, conditions, and history. So I say that out loud, and then I'm thinking to myself, like, if that's fairly easy to obtain and hopefully something that's like going to come out later in the conversation, then maybe it's more important to have the like cool facts about the person at the front. So I'm just going to put build relationships section here. And if we have time, we can flesh it out. But that to me says like, what are some really quick snippets that I can write in here that kind of jog my memory about Karen? And that I can start off with like, Karen has, do you have a pet? No. Karen has no pets. So don't ask her about her pets. Karen is a UX designer. I'm sure that would come out in the conversation as well. She's at Google. And what was your favorite, like most recent favorite memory that you would tell a doctor?
I would tell my doctor I went for a nice bike ride around the lake.
Okay, bike ride around the lake.
It's my doctor.
Okay, great. So that could be great because then I could ask Karen, if I were a doctor, I could ask like, been on any interesting bike rides lately? Like, how did your bike riding inspire your design work this week? So yeah, interesting things about building a relationship. And then I'm going to gloss over this because I feel like this is less interesting and less difficult software. I still think that's the most difficult, but I'm not going to do that yet. Okay, so here we're looking at aggregate. Because we're looking at return clients and getting less turnover, again, this really weird acronym is going to be important here. So maybe like information about length of patient history and more turnover stuff. I'll come back to this. Okay, we'll come back to this. So now entering data. So one of my really big assumptions is that doctors don't have a lot of time to enter data. Is that correct?
We have heard this.
Okay. And it would be really unfortunate if we had them enter the data manually all the time. So I'm going to try and not do that. But then what just popped into my head is like, why don't we just record the conversation as it goes on? But that's really creepy, so we're not going to do that either.
We have some HIPAA violation concerns.
But I'm going to put that there. We'll just put an X because if anyone sees this and they're like, that's really terrible, they won't think that's what we did. Okay, so I don't want to manually do it. I don't want to record the conversation. I wonder if there's a way to like collaborate on entering information. So, do you ever think about your doctor outside of your doctor's appointments? That's not a good idea, because I'm sure you're not like, you should tell like Dr. Drews about my great bike ride today. Okay, so that's not a good idea.
We explicitly know that patients do not like having to give their doctors information outside of the visit.
Okay, so that's definitely a really bad idea. But do they mind giving information in general, or are they a little reticent?
We found in research that people are comfortable giving information, they just get bothered when they have to give it multiple times.
Okay, then in that case, that actually says to me that maybe this is more important, because it's less like, hey Karen, how was your bike ride? And more like, how are you feeling with like X, Y, Z condition? And have you noticed any new symptoms? So I'm actually gonna take this. And I'm gonna move this down, or at the very least make this less important. Because what it sounds like is being approachable is not like, I know everything about your outside life, but more like I listen to you and I hear you and I remember things about who you are as a patient. So I'm going to move this up.
We have about 2 minutes left, and we've just done some user research.
Okay.
And we've actually found out from doctors that they see on average 40 patients a day. Not so how would you change your design?
All right, so that means this is really, really, really hard, and I should have done this first because that's going to be really hard to enter data for 40 people. So let me say now, 40. So that means we really can't do this manually. I'm wondering if there's some kind of guided way that we could say, especially if we're focusing on health and conditions in history now, like a little guided wizard, any updates, maybe like glancing over what's there and just say like confirm that this is correct, and then maybe if they want to enter new details, we can have a little like voice thing that they can speak to, and it'll transcribe it for them, and then they don't have to enter it, and they can just look at it and then say, okay, great, and then they can go, yes. Okay, so I have 30 seconds, so let me recap where we went. So we started by assuming that doctors only saw a couple of people every day. They don't. They see a lot of people and probably spend 5 minutes with them, which is cool. And we want to focus on returning patients. We talked about like what might make a doctor, or like what doctors are focused on in this kind of context. We talked about being approachable and what it means to actually build a relationship. Future user research will be done with doctors about how exactly they build relationships with their clients. We talked about goals, we talked about turnover, we made a weird acronym, and then we talked about information that is aggregate, individual, and the hard part, which is what I would spend more time on if I had more time. Great, thank you so much.
All right, so just to take a second to recap that, again, you'll see the similarity of how the majority of time here is really spent on defining what the problem is and framing what it is that the designer wants to try to accomplish. The other thing I want to point out is that the solutions, as both designers were talking through them, make absolute sense. You're following them. You understand what they're saying, what that thought process is. Like, this is not a design. This is, it's like, but this is how we get to designs, because then, were I to hire Kristen to be on my team, she would take this and she would go back to her desk, and she understands all of the background and has all of the context to turn this into a functional design that focuses on our users. So that's really the crux of it there.
One thing I really love, great example of throwing out a not great or creepy idea of recording the conversation, but I think that really led to speaking to it and letting the UI transcribe that, right? So you may not have gotten there if you didn't throw out like, hey, I know this is creepy, but so I thought that was really awesome too. So again, not an easy thing to do in front of people. Thank you very much, Kristen. Extra special lightning round. We're going to do one prompt. All four of us are going to do it together in 5 minutes. It's going to be pretty quick and fast. And the point is that everyone's solution is going to be different. And so we're going to kind of all unpack the same problem. Let me start in the front row with you to pick what we're going to do. Pick our fate, and I won't look at it. And we can't hold mics because it's really hard. We're going to just ask each other questions and answer. Honestly, I have no idea how this is going to go, but it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, and I think this is to sort of simulate sometimes you are given a prompt and put in a room by yourself, and then they will come back 30 minutes, 45 minutes later, and you present what you've done. So this is the design in a vacuum version.
But I do think if we ask each other questions, we'll just You're going to all look like a giant arrow. We're going to see how it goes.
Make it extended. Alright.
Okay, so you have 5 minutes, you're designing in a vacuum, I'm abandoning you for this interview, and I'm going to come back and you have to explain everything to me. So your design prompt is you are designing an ATM for children.
Alright. Are we all going to talk out loud? Yeah.
What?
I'm wondering like why a child needs to go to an ATM.
Why are we doing this?
What do you define a child as, right?
Yes,
So
what is a child?
I don't think kids know what money is. I think kids want to buy things.
Yeah.
I'm sure really dangerous.
I know that mine was actually for children who are teenagers.
Okay, I'll design for Shirley preteens.
All right, but I'm going to do for toddlers because I got a toddler.
Do you think they're accompanied? Are they with their parents?
I think with parents designed for.
I'm gonna assume like there's no parents.
It could be toy. Is this a toy?
Yeah, why do they need money for stuff?
Yeah, and do they have bank accounts?
Mine doesn't have a bank.
Mine. Is it to buy stuff or is it to learn the value of money?
Yeah, but do you do that at ATM?
I'm
Sorry, I don't mean to not yes. Okay, so I'm going to assume that my Surly preteen users have no parents with them. They have parents, and they do have bank accounts, their own bank account.
I'm going to assume my 6-year-old are with their parents and also have their own bank account. But that bank account is definitely associated with their parents. Well, that depends. It's sort of they're just withdrawing all the money from the parents' bank account.
Mine is sort of an on-demand allowance system, I think. So
Oh,
okay.
That's so clever. I love
I
that.
love it too.
Okay,
so I'm going to assume mine's for 2 to 4-year-olds, so they don't know what money is.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like passwords, how they are going to, identify to find themselves. Small children probably can't remember anything, so maybe they use like hand or something, like fingerprint to do it. Right?
I'm saying like there's a flow of parents with their money, the kid doesn't take money out, and then there's a question of whether there's money in the account.
Wouldn't it be nice if they like very independence in how they were doing it?
But that's why it's attached. You don't want to know. It's inherently cash. How do you know what they're spending it on?
Maybe we'll say that this money cannot be used on drugs.
Like parental policies, you can put like policies in effect, like
Yes, policy, I like that. Policy. Cannot be used on something. Or their parents can make money off them. Like if you buy something, you're going to pay twice.
That's really interesting. Like it's an incentive. There's
Yeah.
like an incentive to not spend, to not
Oh,
borrow.
yes. Yeah, incentive to not spend money, but to invest money, and you get $1 more on something.
we gotta limit it like once every 24 hours. Cheryl,
Oh, infinite time. You plus seconds.
Oh, really?
So I have an ATM for 2-year-old. They don't know what money is. They want stuff. They don't know.